Pop Shop America family, my name is Narola, and today we're painting a bicycle with flower basket. But before we do that, like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Your Pop Shop America Let's Paint Together kit will include an assortment of paintbrushes, a palette, parchment, white, carbon black, cerulean paints, a paint strip, popsicle sticks, a canvas, and you'll need a container of water and some paper towels. I use my popsicle stick to gather the colors I'll need for my ground. So we'll be starting with white, parchment, and black. So I'm adding just a little bit of parchment to my white to get kind of a nice tinted color for my medium toned ground. And so I'm using a large flat brush to lay it in pretty quickly. Now I'm adding a little bit of black to add in some streaks, kind of like various shades of gray streaks. For our ground this time, we will be having or painting like a wooden fence background. And this will be what our bicycle with flower basket will be painted in front of. So now we have our ground with the streaks, and now I'm using probably a medium round brush to sketch in the bicycle. Doesn't have to be perfect, just kind of laying in the basic foundational lines for it. We can always go back in and adjust it with paint. Always keep that in mind. We're using acrylic paint, and once it's dry, you can always go back in and correct any errors or do any tweaks that you need to. So I'm sketching in the basic lines of the bicycle and kind of the basic shape of the basket and the flowers. We're not going for perfection. We're just kind of going for the basic lines and shapes right now. Like I say, they can always be adjusted later. That can be really challenging to get like those perfectly round shapes. But like I say, we can always kind of nudge it into existence as we need to here. This will be a really interesting painting. We're going for a sort of a rustic sepia tone nostalgia. And so the majority of the painting will be kind of monochromatic, like a kind of the parchment with some black, whites, and grays in it. And the only color will be the flower basket itself, the actual flowers. So I have in mind for it to be like a hand-tinted black and white sepia toned photograph. So now I'm adding a little like lighter gray to brush in the form, basic color for our basket. Kind of a mid-tone gray. And I have a smaller flat brush to lay in like a little bit darker gray for like the shadows on our bicycle. And that'll help it give it some dimension, bring out the values. You notice like the fender ended up being kind of a solid gray, which will be fine. That's not a problem at all. We can go back on top of it to lighten it up with acrylic paint later. Going to a slightly lighter grays to add that value. And you'll notice how soft, it almost looks like a charcoal underpainting the way we're doing our paints today. It looks very soft. And it will actually capture like the feelings of the metal and like the textures of the tire. Just these kind of few basic colors. Okay, kind of filling in the tire with a light gray. You can also feel the roundness and the dimensionality of the tire just from these few brush strokes that we put in. All right, it's really starting to come to life already. And you can see also that the forms of the bike are a little bit darker than the ground that we laid down. Now I'm going in with like a little, the color of the ground to kind of fix any strays, to kind of clean it up just a little bit. Yeah, that's what's great about acrylic paint. Like as it dries, you can go in and it goes in pretty opaquely. We can fix the errors pretty quickly. Now I'm using my paint strip and I'm going to start with my flowers. And I'm taking the red straight out of the pot to create the centers for the roses. So I'm going to do 5 roses. So I'm going to paint in 5 circles of various sizes to kind of indicate the sizes of the roses I'll be painting. Now I'm taking a little pink and adding a little bit of red to it to get like a deepish rose to go around the perimeters of my red circles. Because if you look at a rose, like the deepest part of the rose, the deepest colored part is the center, and it gets lighter as you go out towards the edges, the outer petals. So having this center foundation like this is going to help us as we're painting our roses. Okay, so now we're going to start with a little darkened pink, and we're going to paint like these kind of comma parentheses shapes, like in the center, and as we go out towards the edges, like we're kind of painting them in pairs to start, and then we'll start kind of painting just these parentheses around the edges in a more random way. Because roses aren't perfectly symmetrical, though they do have a sort of symmetry to them. So we'll add them in like along the edges, and you can see we're off of the colored portion. You can see a little white coming through, which actually looks really nice. It helps to add to that feeling that the petals are getting lighter as you go towards the outside of the rose. And I'm using for this, like, say that medium round paintbrush again. Okay, so these are all pinkish roses, and now I'm going to change it up a little bit. I've cracked open my peach, and I'm going to make 2 of my roses this kind of peachy color, but the red and deep pink foundation I've laid will help kind of tie all the roses together. And you are more than welcome to make all your roses the same color, but I kind of like doing them in 2 different colors because it adds a little interest and variety, and I think that's kind of fun. You can see our roses have a kind of an impressionistic feel. They're not super complicated, but they do look like roses, simple rustic roses. So now I'm starting with my green and add just a little bit of red to the green. Red and green are complementary colors on the color wheel. And I put the red in there to kind of get like a little bit deeper green to add a darker value of it. And I think that's better than adding black or gray, because I think that would tend to dull it a little bit. Now I'm going to add some wisteria, these purple flowers that kind of drip down. And I added the purple with a little blue to kind of cool it a little bit in contrast to the warmth of the roses. And I kind of like all the different shapes that we have going through this painting that kind of add to it. Like, to me, the flowers, the roses add volume, the leaves add height, and now we're adding our wisteria, and that's going to add like some length and kind of draw your eye down into the painting. Yeah, so we're just kind of embroider those in. Now we're adding a little bit of white, and we're going back in and doing a little bit more cleanup. And you'll notice that I'm kind of painting throughout the painting. I'm not spending too much time on any one part of the painting. That way it's all kind of coming to life all together, so that no one piece like really stands out as being more finished than the others. Now I'm kind of going in with these grays. And I really love just like the subtle area there where I'm painting now, how the colors all sing so delicately together. All those grays harmonize so beautifully. So now I'm taking a little bit lighter gray and kind of adding these like, how would you put it? These dashes, but they're kind of alternating to give the impression of the basket weave. Now I'm going back in with a little bit lighter purple to add some dimension to our wisteria. Some highlights there. And a little darker purple too, on top of that bluish purple that we painted before. Just little dashes with a round brush. So now we're adding more green. Such a beautiful bright green, isn't it? A little more of that rich red. And we're going to paint in some more greenery here. See, isn't it beautiful how like that kind of bright red pops against that kind of deeper red that I created with the red and the green. And here at the bottom, like we have the greenery at the top that adds the height. And I also want to have some greenery kind of dripping down. And it's a little bit darker, and it really makes those roses pop. Like the vibrant color, vibrant warm color of the roses really pop against that slightly deeper greenish color there. So now we're going to take our popsicle sticks if needed, and we're going to draw in the lines of the slats of the fence. This is an older fence, and so the slats might be slightly different sizes. You notice up there in that upper right hand corner, I kind of did like a sketchy line. It's gonna be fine because our fence is a little bit worn. It's got some flaws in it. It's a little weathered. That'll just add to the kind of rustic appeal to it. So we're just kind of zipping in with some variety of gray lines. Okay, and you know, if you paint a little too much paint, you can use your paper towel to soak it up a little bit. It'll add to the texture. Just little zippy lines and kind of swirling lines to add knot holes to give that impression of wood texture. Now I'm going in with my stick at the ready if I need it to add the spokes of my wheel and a darker gray to drop in like some shadows. Look how that already just adds, just those few darker lines add that dimension, adds dimensionality to the bicycle form. The bicycle frame. Kind of reminds me of, if you ever seen the movie Napoleon Dynamite, where when he draws, he was so proud of his shading. So I feel kind of similarly, this is what those dark lines add. So I'm adding some lines to the basket to bring out the basket weave. Now we're adding in some white highlights too, which adds to the dimension of the bicycle. It keeps that beautiful sepia tone monochromatic aspect that we're shooting for, with the flowers bringing in that colorful aspect like a hand-tinted vintage painting, or vintage photograph rather. So now I'm going in with like some pink, a little white added to add highlights to the roses, to give that feeling of light directionality. The white is coming from like the upper left-hand side. And we're going to put in some low lights on the right hand side, like a little bit of lightning, but not as light as the ones coming from the left hand side, to continue giving that dimensionality. And I'm adding some darkness like around the petals too, to give the feeling of shadows and giving more dimensionality. This is looking so beautiful. I'm just adding a little bit of the peach to a little red to add to my peachy roses too. Give them that sense of dimensionality as well. And you can see just how that red center kind of shines out from the roses, and it really helps us a lot in the creation of our roses. Now I'm adding just a little white highlight to the fencing, or lighter highlights. Kind of bring it out a little bit. And you can add in more of the lines for the wood texture if you like, if you want that to be heavier. I really love the play of textures throughout this painting. Like you have like the soft metallic textures, the dull gleam of the bicycle frame, and then the verticality of the wooden fence with its textures, and then the soft impressionistic color of the leaves and the flowers. It's very satisfying. It's very pleasing to the eye. So now I'm going in and adding some darker lines to delineate, the spaces between the slats to get that impression that these are boards that are standing or laying next to each other. And voila!